Beyond the headlines, the true human cost of global debt, mystery plus challenge assumptions. What if I told you the biggest threat to human life today isn't war, cancer, or climate change? It's debt, not your home loan, not your credit card bill. I'm talking about the gigantic, invisible, global debt that decides whether a country gets electricity, whether a child gets medicine, and whether an entire generation gets a future. But here's the part the headlines never show. The real story of global debt, ISNT Financial. It's human. Setting the stage, background, history, tease, twists, global debt didn't appear suddenly. It wasn't created by mistake. It grew slowly like a shadow spreading across the world. To understand today's crisis, we need to go back to the moment the world rebuilt itself after World War II. A new financial system was born, led by the US, supported by Europe, controlled by global banks. On paper, it was meant to create stability. In reality, it created a global dependency on borrowing. Nations needed money to rebuild, banks needed somewhere to lend, and debt became the fuel of the world economy. But no one imagined how big and dangerous this machine would become. We're still living with the consequences. Part 1. The origins of the debt trap in the 1950s and 60s. Newly independent countries in Africa and Asia needed money to build roads, hospitals, and schools. Western banks stepped in with loans. Cheap loans. Easy loans. Too easy. But no one told these nations the truth. You're not borrowing money. You're borrowing time. Then the oil crisis hit in 1973. Oil-rich nations became wealthy. Overnight, they deposited billions into Western banks. Banks suddenly had too much money, so they started giving away loans like candy, often to governments that were unstable, corrupt, or desperate. And just like that, a global debt trap was born. But the real tragedy would begin when interest rates started rising. Part 2. The rise. When debt turned into disaster in the early 1980s, interest rates exploded. The loans that looked harmless suddenly became impossible to pay back. Mexico was the first to fall, then Brazil, then Argentina, then more than 40 countries. They knocked on the IMF's door for help. The IMF said yes. But with painful conditions: cut spending, close schools, reduce food subsidies, privatize everything, raise taxes, fire workers. Economists called it reforms. People on the ground called it something else: survival. Entire nations were forced into austerity. The message was clear: the spreadsheet must survive, even if the people don't. Part 3. Breaking point. Where humans paid the price by the 1990s, the debt crisis had turned into a humanitarian crisis. Africa's darkest debt era, many African countries were spending more money paying interest to foreign banks than on healthcare, education, and clean water combined. Imagine this: a child gets sick. The nearest clinic is closed. Why? Because the government had to cut spending to pay foreign creditors. This is not economics. This is a human tragedy. The Asian financial crisis in 1997, Thailand collapses. Indonesia collapses. South Korea collapses. Within months, millions of jobs lost, currency wiped out. Suicides rise, families lose homes overnight again. The IMF steps in. Again, painful conditions. Again, people pay the price. The pattern becomes clear. Loans gives crisis, gives IMF, gives austerity, gives. Human suffering. Part 4. The crisis comes to the rich world. Many believed only poor countries suffered debt crises. Until 2008, the US housing bubble burst. Banks collapsed. The world plunged into recession. Europe, the wealthiest region on Earth, suddenly became the new face of debt disaster. Greece couldn't pay. Spain couldn't pay. Portugal couldn't pay. Ireland couldn't pay. Hospitals closed. Pensions cut. Homelessness skyrocketed. At one point, Greece's suicide rate rose 40%. Global debt was no longer a third world issue. It had become a global emergency. Part 5. Failed fixes. Why the system is breaking. Since 2008, governments have tried everything: printing money, zero interest rates, bailouts, stimulus packages, new loans, but every solution created more debt. Today, global debt has crossed $330 trillion, more than $40,000 of debt per person on Earth. And here's the dangerous truth: we are repeating the same mistakes. That caused every major debt crisis in history. Sri Lanka collapsed in 2022. Pakistan teetering, Egypt is struggling. African nations defaulting again. Even the US, Japan, and EU are drowning in debt levels, once considered impossible. The system is cracking, and what's coming next is maybe bigger than anything we've seen before. Final takeaways plus warning plus CTA. Takeaway number 1. Debt is not numbers, it's people. Every loan a country takes affects real lives, schools, hospitals, food prices, jobs, and safety. Takeaway. The debt system rewards the present and destroys the future. Governments borrow to survive now, but entire generations pay the price later. Takeaway number 3. History is warning us. Every major debt crisis followed the same pattern. And today, the pattern is global. Final warning, if global debt keeps rising at this speed, the next crisis won't hit one country, it will hit everyone, rich and poor, north and south, east and west. The question isn't if, it's when. Natural call to action if you want more deep dive videos that reveal the hidden forces shaping our world. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the story behind the headlines is always deeper, and we're just getting started.